Hi, guys. I'm going to go ahead and try and read the first chapter of a new work in progress. It's titled Madame Mayor. Chapter 1. Striding purposefully down the corridor, Herminia Busto studied herself in the mirror on the wall by the staircase. Still out of sight of anyone who might be on the first floor, she stopped before the three-quarter length mirror and checked her appearance. Quickly, she brushed fingertips through the ends of her dark brown hair until they curled neatly over the wide white lapel collar of her Elizabeth Arden blouse. She quickly adjusted the silk so the lapels were laid flat over the dark charcoal of her suit jacket. She adjusted the jacket's lines, unbuttoning, then refastening it across her flat stomach. Thin coal eyeliner and mascara outlined her light brown eyes. Her lids held the sparkle of a barely there lavender eyeshadow. Rouge highlighted cheekbones and her naturally dark olive skin. Full lips were outlined and defined by dusted rose lipstick. She pushed a smile onto those lips and let the vision in the mirror of a woman in her late 30s, ready to tackle the day ahead, become her truth. Looking down from her reflection, she studied the collection of framed portraits atop doilies on the highly polished antique side table. Father and mother at her father's last inauguration. Her husband Rex with his arms around their son Trent, 6 years old at the time, wearing a Pop Warner Macclesfield Munchkins football uniform. Exhaling, she reached out and picked up the last one, tracing its lines. Rex stood so close beside her. She remembered the secure feeling of his hand touching hers just below and out of frame. She met his blue eyes shining out at the camera. His words just before she saw the camera flash echoed in her memory. "You got this." She had gotten this, she thought, replacing the portrait in its customary spot. She had also won re-election by a narrow margin 18 months ago. Tugging at the bottom edge of her jacket, Hermione turned and headed down to work. With each step, she left the daughter, the mother, and the widow farther behind. The politically savvy, all-business leader of Macclesfield Town Council, Mayor Herminia Busto, grabbed her business case and cell phone from the foyer table where she'd left them after conducting town business in her home office the evening before. 2 missed calls flashed on the phone screen as she adjusted the case's strap on her shoulder. She thumbed open the display and listened to the voicemails as her heels struck rapidly on the stone walk leading to the driveway and her car. She backed up and turned the car onto the wide paved space in order to drive forward to the street. She pressed a remote in the visor, and the heavy black iron gate ahead started to roll open. The stately colonial home sat on 20 acres, most of which was behind the house. The rest of the original 400-acre property had been long since donated to the town. The gate had been erected around the mayoral mansion during her father's quarter century as mayor, when her mother insisted they needed to maintain a family space to keep people from trying to conduct business with her father at all hours of the day and night. Herminia's morning drive around the block took only 10 minutes. She pulled up to the parking space marked Mayor in front of the town hall. Her public office and those of the council members were inside. The sheriff and other city departments maintained offices here as well. She noticed a few early morning exercisers already out on the paths around Echo Pond. The play on words had been intentional, as the pond was actually an ecological drainage basin that she had advocated for making a landscaped public park when she was just a teenage activist during her father's tenure. A bright, cheerful voice shattered the morning stillness. "Madam Mayor!" She turned to face Cynthia Hollins, chief among her policy advisors. Midnight black hair, coiffed short, bounced around the other woman's face as she hurried across the parking lot. "Miss Hollins." She hoped that the dryness of her tone would mute Cynthia's ebullience. But on this day, as with many others, Mayor Busto was disappointed when the other woman merely smiled fulsomely and then gushed, "Happy Monday!" It is Monday, however happy it remains to be seen. She strode to the double doors at the front of Town Hall with Cynthia at her heels. A police officer was shouldering his way out, but paused to hold the door for the 2 women. Cynthia and the officer exchanged wide grins. "Good morning," they greeted each other. Herminia rolled her eyes as she left them behind. She clearly heard the sound of her heels clicking on the parquet and abruptly paused with her hand on the door. She looked up and realized everyone else in the lobby had paused whatever they were doing to stare at her. A man with a fringe of white hair and age spots liberally coloring his head and face rested his hands on the shoulder of a tow-headed little boy. The open door of an office rested against his back. The sign beside the door read, "Macclesfield Public Works." When the man realized Hermione saw him, he said, "Good morning, Madam Mayor." She schooled her scowl from dealing with Cynthia and aimed for an amiable tone. "Good morning." The boy looked up at her from his position tucked against the man's leg. The man prodded his back. The preschooler tried to mimic the older man, whom Hermione had guessed to be his grandfather. "Good morning, Mad Mare." "Hello," she replied. Quickly she turned and strode to the door with "Mayor" printed in the smoky glass. A newspaper reporter with his media pass hanging around his neck stepped back as she entered. "Just the person I wanted to see," he said. "Got a few questions." "Make an appointment," Hermione snapped as she started to move around him. He mumbled something she ignored and finally reached her inner office. Shutting the door behind her, Hermione leaned back against it briefly, then straightened and stripped off her suit jacket. Hanging it over a hook on the coat tree, she picked up her business case and moved to the antique colonial desk that dominated the space. She was laying open her business case on her desk when the door to the office opened. She looked up to see Janie Baz, her personal secretary, holding out a mug. Steam from the liquid inside wafted visibly above the rim. She inhaled and caught the scent of mint. Saying nothing, Janie walked across the space, held out the mug. Hermione took it in both hands, pressing them around the wide and warm porcelain, covering the message, "I heart my mom," printed in childlike scrawl on the side. "Thank you," she said. "You have a full schedule this morning. There's a reporter outside. Tell him I'm not available today." "All right. Who's first?" "Police Commissioner Jenkins. His monthly report isn't due until next week. He said something's come up." Hermione nodded and sipped again at her mint tea. "All right. Give me 15 minutes to put out any email fires, then send him in." She didn't need to mention that it would give her time to finish her tea in peace and quiet. Janie simply nodded and withdrew. Hermione heard the young woman stalling the police commissioner with an offer of coffee just before the door closed. Sitting down at her desk, Hermione nudged her mouse with an elbow and awakened the computer from sleep.